It should be no coincidence that the early 20th century saw both the introduction of Freud's theories of the subconscious and films that explored the power of our dreams. Movies were born from an era of rising psychological science, and clearly influenced many of cinema's early masterpieces, including the fantastically distorted Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. As time went on, and cinema became a multi-billion-dollar business, we replaced themes of an unknown psyche with the all-too-familiar concerns of government propaganda, sublimating the collective paranoia of the time into sea monsters and zombies. Horror is the lens through which we view our collective fears, which have remained surprisingly unchanged over the years, often simply playing out the same scenes for different generations. Whether we're aware of it or not, horror works best when it taps into the zeitgeist and forces us to see, not the unknown, but often what we are afraid to admit. In this episode, we'll be looking at Candyman, released in 1992, and although being well received at the time, is today considered nothing more than just an average horror film, exploiting cheap thrills from its excessive gore and far-fetched mythical villain. Helen Lyle is a graduate student researching urban legends for a university thesis, and while interviewing other students one day, she overhears about Candyman, an African-American hook-handed murderer that can be summoned by saying his name 5 times while looking into a bathroom mirror. Her initial distance and natural cynicism is quickly replaced by genuine discomfort when she hears of a gruesome murder attributed to the same Candyman, only a few miles away in Cabrini-Green, a housing project inhabited largely by impoverished African Americans.
Tell her what you told me about the Candyman.
She said there's somebody coming through the walls, and they didn't believe her.
From the safe confines of the university library, Helen discovers a series of real-life murders from the same area, of which mysterious circumstances fuel her interest. And like pretty much every other horror film, it places much of its importance into the locations themselves. Of course, this is nothing new, and horror movies have often used the backdrop of a past deeply buried, perhaps to critique a whitewashing of American history, or simply to fill in the holes of a narrative and avoid any real issue at all. And although it can be a tough one to call, Candyman doesn't exploit this device, making research and investigation its core theme. Helen has a view of Chicago from her apartment, and sitting on the distance, she can see Cabrini-Green, which stands out from the skyline as it is not proudly displayed with light, sitting like a splinter in the side of the city's affluent Gold Coast. In what is perhaps the film's most overlooked scene, Helen points out that her luxury apartment was in fact designed to be the very same building, the layout of which is identical, down to the very same architectural flaws. Mirroring real life, the film makes it clear how poorly designed social housing is, and as such, places people in more direct danger than actually helping to protect them.
See, there's no wall there. There's only a medicine chest separating us from the other apartment.
And once you start noticing the details, you see them everywhere, as clear as the street signs that ironically maintain segregation. Built on Division Street, it's no mystery why feelings are hostile, from those often branded as worthless. Helen's investigation soon takes her into Cabrini-Green itself, filmed on location in 1992 and accompanied by the fantastic score by Philip Glass. As she walks through dark apartments, accompanied only by graffiti, we get a strong sense of déjà vu. The line starts to blur between fantasy and history, and the film naturally begins to fall apart, just as Helen leaves her academic books behind, going to a place very few white Americans dare explore. The device of looking into a mirror to summon Candyman shouldn't be overlooked. After all, this is a film about the horror of looking back at ourselves. Notice how, throughout the film, the wealthy skyline of Chicago is framed with an attitude smugly proud, unconcerned with those at ground level. Or how when Helen arrives back home, finds her husband and new girlfriend painting the walls to her apartment. In this simple act of masking over the past, we find the point of the entire film. If cities can be twinned with each other, then so can films, and in my opinion the perfect companion piece is none other than Michael Haneke's Cachet. which also follows an idealistic middle-class character as he attempts to investigate a mystery that in turn reflects that of his country's shameful past. Whether or not Candyman exists is beside the point, because places like Cabrini-Green do, not just in Chicago, but in every city around the world. And we realise, along with Helen, that racism and segregation will always be alive, so long as the powers that be turn a blind eye and pass it all off as just make-believe. On the next episode, we'll be revisiting a film that paints itself as a heist movie, yet could be the most romantic film I've ever seen. It's Michael Mann's film, Heat.